A very good morning to you. My name is David Batsoffen, and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. And at the moment, I'm doing a series called In Conversation With. And this morning, my guest is Al Prodgers. Al, good morning, and welcome to you.
Hi, David. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Why is Shakespeare wearing a miner's hat?
Over there. That was a poster from when they recreated the Globe Theatre.
Oh.
And that was the poster. It's about 25 years ago that I was in London and watched them build it. And you could contribute to the funding by buying a poster.
Well, that's fair enough.
As they would say in the UK, health and safety gone mad, you know, Shakespeare's wearing a hard hat. Oh, in my day.
Now, luckily, you're not sitting too close to your bookshelf, because books seem to have become quite a thing in Zoom conferences with people trying to read titles. I noticed that you haven't taken any time or trouble to either alphabetize, coloritize, or even put by size on your shelves. And
that
good for
is
you.
The sign of very sick mind. And with very, very few exceptions, I don't think you should be ashamed of books anyway. So those are I'm sitting outside in my office, in my outside Zozo hut, which is my office because my family has grown and evicted me from my home office. Most of these I got in the secondhand charity bookshops, and I love them. So I don't care what you think of me. I will read just about anything.
Because I was talking to somebody just this morning, talking about reading during lockdown. And I'm an avid reader. I'm a novel. I like novels. Not so much of the self-help stuff, but I will read anything that has a body on page 1. And the worse the death, the more inclined I am to read it. But at the moment, and I don't know about you, Al, I'm battling with concentration. So I've been reading Gary Larson Far Side comic books, and Calvin and Hobbes to keep me occupied when I get into bed at night.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the wonderful thing about it, of course, is just the joy in the small details of life.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about connecting with you on Facebook is your father-in-law's cartoons that you sometimes put out.
Right.
And they may reflect back to a different time, and it's scary how those times are still so relevant. But what I love is the love and the joy in life in those drawings. The fact that they are there, you know, nowadays I think that weird idea that everybody has to be a scold, you know what I mean? Everybody, and you can get far more across in a lovingly drawn cartoon that shows a slice of someone's personal life. And that I've really enjoyed it. That and your wildlife photographs, which, seeing as we're going nowhere, and every now and again a client phones you every 5 minutes and yells at you for not going nowhere fast enough. It's been
as I've taken to describing myself, I'm currently a non-travel travel writer.
I love your mug, by the way.
Thank you.
I think my mug shows the fact that most of us are currently unemployed.
You should start marketing those. There's an opportunity there to sell blank mugs. Why? Well, we're unemployed.
It's a mug that really reflects what you're going to be doing today.
You know,
but wait, there's more.
There's more. And tomorrow we can just keep spinning this around. What is the flat?
Can you handle it? No.
Bada bing. I've got one of those apps that does drum rolls, but unfortunately you don't seem to be able to hear it on this on Zoom. But the interesting thing, you mentioned those cartoons. Now, the majority that I've been using are from the early 1970s. They were from a series that, for people who don't know who my father-in-law is, it's Dor Fedler, the political cartoonist. He did a series for the Saturday Star in those days where he'd post one of those pictures and you had to add a caption to it. And those
Right.
are all from the early to mid 70s, yet they are still relevant today. And that's how scary or how cyclical our world actually is. We think this is all new and has never happened before, but some of it has. We've just forgotten about it.
Absolutely. You know, that's the arrogance, is that, do you remember, I think it was the 90s when that historian wrote the book, The End of History. And boy, was he wrong. And, but, you know, when we were teenagers, and of course, teenagers doing everything, we thought of everything, you know what I mean? And of course, the moment the hormones started kicking in, we thought we were experiencing things that no one had ever. And one of my friend's moms at one point said to us, the problem with you boys is you think you all arrived here by immaculate conception. She was in fact telling us that, you know, the generations before us have all gone through these things.
Yep. This is the thing. Now, I don't want to segue from that into what are you doing now, because that's a link I don't want to go, a road I do not want to go down. But
yeah, some roads are less traveled because they damn well they should be. Because there's a big sign saying don't go there.
Yeah. I went down the road less traveled. No, you didn't. It's been traveled before, and it will be again. That's the thing.
I went down the road less traveled, and the AA couldn't find me.
There's a lovely, I don't know if you watch Shameless. Okay, so it's a TV series, and he's an alcoholic and a pillaholic, the lead guy, and he was in a rehab in this week's episode, and he said, I came to a fork in the road. One road led to addiction. The other road also led to addiction. So I turned around and went back the way I'd come, which I thought was quite apt. I thought he was going to get deep and philosophical, but no. As long as it leads back to a drink or a pill, he was happy.
Yeah. I think it was Kermit the Frog who said, when you get to a fork in the road, take it.
Yeah. Who was it from there? I think it was Kermit who said, time's fun if you're having flies. Now, Al, people know you. They've seen you doing stand-up comedy. Firstly, are you still doing? Well, you can't do stand-up now, but I suppose you could, like some others, like Alan Committee has done a stand-up comedy from home. But it must be,
sure.
Even that must be very difficult if you don't have an immediate response, because you and I both know if you step up on stage and you crack your best joke and there's just a sea of faces looking at you going, is that all you've got? And you just want to go home and start working for Pick and Pay or something like that.
And you realize you're not qualified for that either.
Yeah.
That moment when the ice cold single drop of sweat runs down the back of your neck. Yeah. Well, no, I haven't done shows, you know, from home, because I found that I have had to start again, because the body of comedy that I've developed over 20 years is really not relevant.
Right.
There's no point doing gags about, well, I was stuck in traffic the other day, because you weren't.
The audience is going, what's traffic?
Exactly. So I've been writing a lot more, but what I have done, and this has been something which has been wildly exciting, is discovering that now that companies are doing events, but they're doing them online. At first, they thought that there was no need for an MC anymore, because you know, people are just all in the grid view and talking at once, and they've discovered that communication needs to be facilitated, and a good MC, a professional MC that can work online, is actually a great asset, even if you're having an online conversation. And so I've done some launches for companies, and I've done some work where it has been short, sharp MC work, and because of course there's so much distraction. I mean, a long form conversation like we're having online is almost unheard of. It's there's so much distraction, and so I've been able to almost, I won't say create a new style, but create a new style for myself, putting in new relevant comedy in short bursts as part of an MC function, and that's what I've largely been doing.
Because it's interesting, Al. I've attended a couple of these webinars where people who are respected in their particular industries, but have no idea how to communicate visually. They are slow, they are pedantic, they are repetitive, and what turns out to be sort of an hour's webinar could basically have been done in an email with a small PowerPoint presentation. And maybe that's also something that I'm hoping. I so hate PowerPoint presentations, specifically bad ones, where all they're doing is that you walk into the venue, there's the PowerPoint presentation that the boss is doing on a screen behind you, and lying on your chair or on your desk or wherever you're having this conference in the good old days is a hard copy version of what's on the screen. And all the guy does is just read from your hard copy what's on the screen. So why bother to go? So what you're doing by getting in there, keeping it short, keeping it sharp, keeping it entertaining, is actually a way that I think personally is going to be, and I hate using this expression, the new norm going forward. You know, we had the new South Africa in 1994. It's what now, 26 years later? Has it changed? Is it the old South Africa? Is it just South Africa? We don't know. So what happens going forward? I'm hoping stuff like this is going to become the norm, and people are going to learn to do it properly and to utilize the platforms.
Well, as you say, it was previously very easy for people to dismiss communication as, oh, the soft skills. And now they're realizing that suddenly the camera is very unforgiving of themselves, of what's behind them, of everything, and that the camera hides certain things and distorts other things. And instead of being able to hide, they realize that the camera actually magnifies and amplifies every bad habit, every little idiosyncrasy. And suddenly people are flocking in for coaching to learn these soft skills, because let's face it, people still do business with people, and they do business with people they like and that they can form a bond with. And what you've done over radio and blogging and writing is you form a bond with people. What I do with comedy is you have to form that bond within the first very short space of time, and then you can take them on the journey wherever you want to go with them, wherever they'll allow you to go. But the classic of death by PowerPoint and all of those things that people have relied on, they're realizing that the human relationship is incredibly important. By the way, you mentioned that some meetings can be emails. Sure, I'm amazed where, especially when we were in the level 5 hard lockdown and people really weren't seeing each other, that suddenly you'll get 6 people in a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting, and someone wants to dive straight into the meeting. And those 6 or 8 people really just need a few minutes to connect to other human beings again.
It's called small talk.
Yes, just a little bit of that. Little bit of I don't know, David. You and I date from the same era. You remember that Afrikaans saying "net 'n bietjie liefde"?
Yeah.
That wonderful. People just need that little bit of humanity, that little bit of love, that little bit of, hey, how are you? Wow, you're looking great. Or otherwise, whoa, soft focus there. You're not looking so good. People really need that. And so that's what I've been I mean, I've been working on, and it's something that I've also really, I think, been noticing about myself, is how often, how clumsy we've become about human relationships, just stomping over other people with my hobnail boots to get to my point. And now realizing that people really need an opportunity to express themselves and to listen.
My best with these Zoom sort of interviews or conversations is they always start the same way. Hello, I have no idea. When we go to have coffee with a friend, we don't walk up to the table and go, hello, because we can see them, like I can see you. And the other one is at the end of one of these conversations, or if you say to somebody, don't you want to share your screen? Now they're uncertain of where that button is, so they tend to do this, and you have no idea. What are you looking for?
It's the 2020 version of, you know, with the old microphone. Is this thing on?
Isn't that your best, Al? They always do it, and specifically if it's let's say you're doing corporate work, and I'm sure you found this. The MD of the company steps up. You've just walked away. You've just stepped away from the mic, going, "Please welcome on stage the MD of your corporation, Bob Smith." And you take a step back. Bob Smith walks up and does exactly that. Is this thing working? You've just heard it, Bob. The sound guy has left the building now. He's gone to an audiologist to get his hearing fixed up. Why do they do that?
People do it it's a tick to get over the initial nerves of stepping up to the microphone. I don't mind that so much as you get generally South African men who believe that in order to communicate with their company, they have to be plain-spoken, ordinary people. And so they've just spent millions on a huge conference, of which I am the cheapest component. I've just used a microphone to connect to all of those people. And now they walk up and go, "Oh, I don't really need this, do I?" See, to waste millions of rands pretending that they can speak without a microphone and talking to the first three people in the front row, and everybody else just goes, "Oh,
well, may as well go home." I mean, you and I that know how to project can do that with ease, and knowing that if there is an issue with the sound system and the techie comes to you and says, "Listen, we're battling with the microphone," you go, "Listen, don't worry about it. I can reach the back of this hall without worry. Right? In fact, we can go past the back of the hall. I can speak to people in a different province." Hang on a second. Are you allowed to do that under lockdown active level 3? Can you speak to a different province? You can't travel to it.
I think under lockdown level 3 announcement due to be announced tomorrow, other provinces have actually been banned. Other provinces have been banned along with tobacco. You're in this on your own.
Make up your own rules. When the cops stop you, if you start quoting paragraphs and sub-paragraphs, hopefully you'll confuse them enough to go, "No, just go. Just go. We couldn't be bothered with you."
And get a rifle butt in your face for being smart.
Well, this is the issue, because these lockdown regulations, I mean, we went from levels, they're now called active levels. Now, I don't know where or who changed the name, but our president did mention active levels. It's the same as, when did students become learners? I don't know pupils. Pupils or students. Because half of them aren't learning anything, Al. They're just sitting. They should be called attendees, because they're not doing anything except being there. Now, I know you have 2 daughters. Have you been homeschooling? Are you and your wife good teachers?
Oh yes, homeschooling. My daughters are young, so we're doing the 4 times table, which is, I told you 4 times to pick up that stuff off the floor.
You sound just like Nanny Joe. Are you doing Super Nanny at your house?
Yeah, we are doing homeschooling. Let's face it, it is a completely different thing if you are, let's say you work for a big corporation and you've been sent home, and you are a top exec and you have a stay-at-home wife who runs the whole household. And now the two of you have some extra time on your hands, so you can now homeschool. But my wife and I, both entrepreneurs, have discovered that we're working harder than ever. And now we're trying to, we're trying to run the company without the small amount of employees that we have. And now we've got to do homeschooling, and we have really struggled to keep up. Also, I find that, kids logging on to a meeting with their teacher, that's all well and good. But the teacher quite often will say something like, by now you have to have done that. And if you weren't able to do that with your kid yesterday, suddenly the kid freaks out and goes, why didn't you teach me that? Oh, anxiety problems. It has been very difficult. Look, we're fortunate that we have had support from the schools, but I think that they have vastly overestimated what can be done and what should be done at home. I've discovered that just doing simple things like my wife taking some time and baking, you can teach kids about volume and liters and all sorts of stuff by baking something with them.
Yeah.
Dad can teach kids new words by trying to build something and smacking your finger with a hammer. That's English.
You got there before I did.
Anglo-Saxon vocab. We did history and language today.
101.
Yes. When you got into the slightly political side of things, I see that behind you, because I'm also looking behind you, I see you have a ministerial voodoo doll up there over your shoulder.
You're talking about that?
Yes. Oh, and the blue one as well. Do you stick pins in those in order to get? Well, I mean, there you go. There you go.
Now, here's your history lesson for today. So I hope you're going to be present, because there will be a small pop quiz at the end of this particular.
Right.
This guy's name, he's from Zanzibar, and his name is Emerson, because we stayed at the Emerson Hotel, which is where the very last slave auction in Zanzibar took place hundreds of years ago. And what I didn't realize is that David Livingstone was involved in the abolition of slavery on Zanzibar. He was very involved. And what had happened is that when slavery was abolished, the slave traders had stock. And they just went, no, we can't just give our stock away. So what are we going to do? So they had an auction. The very last auction of slaves was at the Emerson Hotel. And the understanding is the slave traders would get paid and the slaves would be set free. So they were never indentured. And he is from the island, and we found him. There is another very famous artist that makes these sort of things. This is a knockoff. The other artist is dead, which means his stuff is incredibly expensive. And we found this at a local market and we liked him.
Well, it's strangely disturbing and very beautiful, and at the same time that story is one of those stories that where history teaches us things all the time, because people are constantly right now talking about unloading their stock and all of those kind of things, and you realize that everything comes with a human cost. That blue one reminds me of the South African artist Norman Catherine. His very
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Anyway, let's not get too artistic and intellectual here.
If we want to go to the other end of the scale, then you mentioned my father-in-law, and aside from doing cartoons, he also does casting. So this is his Moses, which is one of my favorites. He did a whole series, but this could be anybody. As far as I'm concerned, this is just a very, very powerful figure that has helped me on occasions when I'm sort of a bit unfocused. Then I look at him and I go, okay, there we go. I can deal with the stuff now.
Oh, yes. you know, you were mentioning earlier on about being slightly distracted.
Yeah.
I have discovered that for all its faults, and I think we harp too much on faults,
Right.
and we harp too much on the fact that something is not as sensitive as we would like it in 2020.
Yeah.
There is great wisdom and power in old books, and in old books that are 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, there's great strengths to be had. And I think the insanity of the 21st century of trying to start at a kind of year zero mentality, where if it's not on the net and it hasn't been sanitized, and now suddenly instead of reading the original book, you read what some professor today tells you about the old book. No. Go back to the source and find stories, works of art, old books. I found it an enormous help in these times when sometimes you just feel pretty helpless.
Well, this is it. I've recently interviewed, and the interview hasn't been aired yet, but one of my upcoming interviews is with a clinical psychologist, and we were discussing that very thing, because people are struggling. Even strong people who perceived they were strong before, have realized that days can sometimes be very dark, and you need something to look forward to. And you found it in books. I found it in the madness that is this room that I'm allowed in my house currently.
Of course, yes.
You know, so there's those things, and it doesn't matter if they PC or if they have, as you said, been sanitized. Who cares? You're in your own world, and if that's the way you need to deal with it, you need to deal with it. You know, as long as you don't go running down the street screaming at the top of your voice about certain issues that you know will get you arrested or at the very least beaten up. I think we need to. I still hanker for the past. I want a dial-up phone again, not ADSL, but I want a dial. I want a rotary dial phone. That's what I want.
We found one in the storeroom, an old. It's sort of 70s green.
Oh, right. Yes, I know the one you're talking about.
One of those kind of, it was a step up and we found one, and we put it in the kids' playroom, but we first had to explain to them what it is. And they were looking at us with that kind of, you know, like Kardashians at a maths exam, that they were looking at us and they couldn't believe. You could just see my children looking at me going, damn, you primitive. Yes, I would love, I think, you know, of course, there's so many things today that are so much better and more wonderful. And, but there's also the fact that things were slower. You know, Stephen Hawking was once asked about his debilitating disease, and perhaps it was an excuse, but he did say that he was grateful because it gave him more time to think. Yeah, and a slower life does that for you. I mean, you know, being in the bush, you can sit there and stare at that fire, and whew, you become profound.
It are profound.
Yeah.
What did I see today? Somebody posted, it is so cold that they saw an Afrikaans guy. And I don't know why they picked on Afrikaners, because I wear shorts every day of my life. And they said it was so cold that they saw a guy wearing 2 pairs of shorts.
Yeah, the last 24 hours suddenly become colder than a frog's fingerprints, I tell you.
But worse is still on the way. I was talking to my daughter this morning who lives in Cape Town, and she tells me not only have they got the cold, which is what we had yesterday, but they've got rain as well. So that might eventually get to us in the next few days. But we lit a fire in our house last night, which was lovely. The fact that we don't have a fireplace is neither here nor there.
Yes.
But there
What is
is something about watching a fire, Al.
Somebody quick, put the cat out.
Yeah, why?
Why?
It's on fire. Thank you, Spike Milligan. Or as he referred to himself, when they came back after years, the Goons came back and did a reunion, and he was reading and he went, "It says here Spike Milligan. I see we have the same typist as 1953." People who were vastly ahead of things as we know them today. But again, I do believe, and I've been watching a reasonable amount of comedy during this lockdown period, because I think we do need, somebody said they'd lost their mind, and I said, yeah, mine's gone, but it's taken part of my sense of humor with it. I think that humor, good, bad, or indifferent, is going to get us through a lot of this. And the humor doesn't have to be relevant, it doesn't have to be pertinent, it doesn't even have to be PC. But it's what is going to keep us as humanity going. Because where would we be without Donald Trump? I mean, we'd be lost. We'd have nothing to talk about.
I think that that people don't mind being scolded when times are going good, and we all tend to feel a little bit guilty when times are going good, and then we'll be scolded. There's either a breeze behind you, or there's a poltergeist, or there's a cat.
No,
something.
It's the breeze. I've just covered the window, so there's nothing behind the curtain, says he, hopefully. Okay.
We're back.
Yeah. I'll close the window, then the curtain will stop moving. There we go.
I think when times are going okay, people don't mind being scolded, but I've noticed that as times have got tougher and the lockdown has gone on, there is a need for humor that's just a little lighter and a little more forgiving. And, you know, nobody wants to be perpetually scolded. And so that I've tried, you know, in the little bit of Facebook communication and things that I've done, to avoid scolding people and to avoid being one of those people who sucks the fun out of every situation and sucks the laughter out of every situation. There are little things, you know, like walking my dog. I normally take it to a park and let it run. Now suddenly I've got to take it on a leash up the road because parks are somehow unhealthy. I mean, I believe oxygen, you know, is terrible. But you know, you walk a little Pekingese on a leash, and you realize it comes factory fitted with a 20-liter bladder.
Yeah. I saw that comment yesterday. So you're just walking a bladder and not a dog, basically.
Yes. You discover things. You know, you discover that pet hair sticks to everything except the pet. These are little things that we just have to lighten up a little, and not get so incredibly po-faced and correct about everything. And that doesn't mean I'm going to set out to offend anybody, but at the same time, I do think that part of the coping mechanism of humor and comedy is that people do get to say what they're thinking, and if it's not something that is deliberately set out to hurt, I think we need to be a little bit more forgiving. I mean, the internet is forever. And that has created a kind of way of living without any possibility of redemption. I think the idea of busting people for tweets that they had 10 years ago, like the guy who lost the Oscar gig. You know, it's just insane. If you haven't moved on from 10 years ago, then you've wasted 10 years.
This is it, you know. I hear what you're saying, because I was meant to have attended my school reunion, and they formed a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group, and the jokes that started happening, I went, really? You guys are still in the 70s. Do I want to be part of this? I've moved on. I'm not who I was back in between, let's say, 66 and 70 when I was at high school. And was I looking forward to it? Yes, it was our 50th reunion. I was really looking forward to it. But as it turned out, COVID got in the way anyway, so I wouldn't have been able to attend. But as you say, there are people who are still stuck back then. There are also people currently on anti-social media, as I refer to it, who want to be prefects. They either were at school or they want to be now. And if you say something, exactly, I didn't get the memo. And if you say something that offends them, there is a very quick go-to from their side that takes you to a space and you go, really? That wasn't what I was thinking at all. And then your hands go into this because you want to type something that will do that, but it's a pointless exercise because you can deal with ignorance. Ignorance can be rectified sometimes, but stupidity can't, or they don't want to rectify it. And so it's easier just to go, all right, if you thought that of my comment, good for you, I'm going to let it go, or I'm going to delete my comment. And then you can worry about why it's gone.
Well, it's the classic, the two tactics, the straw man argument and the personal attack, the ad hominem attack, which are the two go-to places. Oh, and my favorite these days, I apologize if you've used this one, but it's the threat to defriend or to unfriend.
Who cares? Defriend me.
I will unfriend. Oh well. Oh, I'll just have to make do with the 7 other billion people in cyberspace. I'm really.
I love that.
Yeah. I will unfriend you.
But you know what's even funnier, Al? When people do that at the beginning of the year, and then they say, I'm going through my friend list, and if you can read this, you're still my friend, and if you can't, well, and I go, why? Tell me. I don't care. If you want to defriend me, just do it. And if I don't see you for a while, if I wonder what's happened to you, I will send you a private message and go, what happened? And then you can say, listen, you're a bit of an arsehole, and I'd rather not have you on my feed because you just say negative things every day. But as you point out, I'm going to defriend you. Go ahead. I didn't want you in the first place.
If I'm still on your friends list, you've obviously misunderstood what I've been posting.
But also, don't you get, from back in the day, you get friend requests, and then you look at, it says you've got one mutual friend, and then you look at the mutual friend and you go, really, this is such a tenuous link. That I don't want to, or it's from back in the 50s and 60s from my childhood, people that I didn't want to speak to then, and now, why must I speak to you now? I didn't like you then. Do you think anything has changed?
But on the other hand, I have met wonderfully insane people who have got the most pyrotechnic minds that you would never, from what you've met them perhaps professionally in a bank. You've met them in a corporate situation, and you meet these wonderfully insane people, and I love it because then you really do make new connections. And there are a couple of these memes that have come through. We've discovered that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. One kind are not essential at all, and the other kind are essential and don't get paid enough. Generally, us, let's face it, we're part of the chattering class, and we really are kind of superfluous. The people who really do work and who are, they're wonderful people. Yeah. I just think that there are people who have overestimated their own importance in the grand scheme of things.
When the suit comes off or when the suit goes on, that's how quickly they can chop and change. But you brought up an interesting point a little while ago, Al, where you were talking about the corporate MD who is now stuck at home. His wife is a stay-at-home mom, or a home executive, if you want to use the politically correct term. She's used to being at home, and she's used to doing things in a certain manner because that's the way the household runs. He's the boss of a large corporation. He's used to screaming at people and having, pardon me, people at his beck and call. He's now thrust into a situation that is foreign to him, and he has to learn to adapt, literally adapt or die.
and he's about that close from being strangled in his sleep. Because, yeah, absolutely. Look, I have, enormous respect for the fact that everybody has had to adapt to these changing circumstances. And I think you can see how out of their depth people are by the, it's a lot of people have had that. You can see online that they're not at their best. They're at that moment. It's like when you're moving through an airport, you're not at your best. You just need to realize that we've got to cut each other a little bit of slack. The people who run houses and do all that kind of stuff, I know I've discovered how incredibly, and I mean, we're freelance people, so we spend a lot more time at home with our spouse anyway.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that as a freelance person, I can generally take my kids to school and spend more time with them during the day. And then if I'm working at night, not as much as people who work 9 to 5.
Right.
But it's been a hell of a process of adapting.
In more ways than one, I've just discovered that my wife bakes some of the best scones I've ever tasted. And they're very easy to make. So sort of wake up in the morning and I'll say to her, scones? And she'll go, yeah, why not? So there's a lot of work I'm looking forward to not having to exercise at 6 o'clock in the morning because it's too cold. But once we go into active level 3 on the 1st of June, that I have no more excuse. I can go out in the middle of the day if I want.
But wait, there's more. There's level 3 with active ingredients.
Al,
I don't smoke. I want to start on principle, really.
I don't even want to go down that route. So I want to actually leave it there. I've had such a blast talking to you. I really and truly have. So thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule to chat to me. I wish you and the family health and safety. No, that sounds terrible. I hope that you'll continue to be safe and healthy, not health and safety. I expect you'll hear good morning. We're from Health and Safety. David sent us.
Do you realize that now that everybody's got to do the whole face mask and things, there's smiles are now suddenly so rare. I think we're going to sort of start seeing there are going to be these sites on the website where it's kind of, you can see people. It's going to be like smile and nose porn. It's going to be
the new nudity. Nofacemasks.com. I see it already. Al, thank you so much for chatting to me. If people do want to contact you, if they're looking for MCs or if they're looking for somebody like yourself to host a conference perhaps for them, how do they go about it?
www.lprodgers.co.za.
It's as simple as that. And if you Prodgers, Prodgers. And if you don't know where to find him, you can find me at this very address, www.travelandthings.co.za.
That is so high tech.
Al, thanks very much. Bye for now.
Cheers. Thank you, David.